When the RTX 4070 Ti launched a few weeks ago, it was followed with some pretty mixed and some pretty negative reviews, and then mostly because of the price. It also didn't help that Nvidia launched this card in the middle of a holiday and didn't really share any pricing information until a few days before it, when most of the content was already made. So I thought it would be very interesting to revisit it now that we know a bit more about the actual prices and about the actual stock, and do a little roundup of the models I've tested so far. So let's see if the RTX 4070 Ti makes sense at all, knowing what we know today, and if it does, which one of these 5 models should you be looking at? Let's begin. This video is brought to you by Seasonic and their Prime TX power supplies. These fully modular, high-quality power supplies are extremely efficient. They are very quiet due to their new hybrid fan control that stops the fans completely under 40% load. They offer a variety of connections for any kind of systems you have in mind, and you even get the new 12-volt high-power connection you need for the brand new RTX 4090 graphics cards from Nvidia. They range from 650 watts all the way up to 1600 watts for the biggest enthusiasts out there, and as a nice bonus, you get a cozy 12-year-long warranty. Check them out using the links in the description below. The RTX 4070 Ti is the latest 4000 series GPU from Nvidia. It launched after and was positioned under the RTX 4090 and RTX 4080 cards, so it uses the same new architecture and production process, but it has fewer cores, less memory, and a smaller memory bus. It is also a lower power card, and it is cheaper with the recommended retail price of $799 in the US and 909 euros here in the EU. And even though MSRP doesn't really mean that much, if you look at the prices today, you can actually buy most of these new cards at their MSRPs. In the US, there are several 4070 Ti's available at $800 or a little bit more if you want a nicer custom card. And the RTX 4080 is available at its $1,200 MSRP as well, with custom cards closer to $1,300. Only the RTX 4090 is still above its $1,600 MSRP. Now there are one or two at $1,800, but they generally cost closer to $2,000. Now, if we add AMD to that list, the situation is similar. The 7900 XT is available at or slightly below its $900 MSRP, but the top-end XTX, which is supposed to cost $1,000, is actually much harder to get. There are a few at around $1,200, but even those are very, very rare. Here in the Netherlands, however, and Europe in general, the situation is similar for Nvidia cards. You can find some 4070 Ti's at around 900 euro MSRP, although most aftermarket cards do cost closer to 1000 euros. You can find several 4080s at around 1400 euro MSRP, with some models even costing less than that. And while the RTX 4090 supply was terrible for such a long time, it is much better now, and you can actually find some models at their MSRPs or slightly above. But the AMD supply is worse here. AMD is selling their XTs directly at MSRP, but custom cards generally cost closer to 1100 euros, while the XTX will cost you at least 1400 euros or more, which is way too expensive. So now that we know some real prices, we can make a better comparison between all the options out there. And if I compare the 4070 Ti to the 4080 in 25 different games, the 4080 is about 10% ahead on 1080p, 18% ahead on 1440p, and 24% ahead on 4K resolution. But a 4080 is around 50% more expensive, so here 4070 Ti does offer a better value overall. But compared to the RTX 4090, the 4090 is just a lot faster, about 64% at 4K resolution and 42% at 1440p. And it is also more than twice as expensive, so in theory, the 4070 Ti offers more performance for your money, but in practice, people don't really buy 4090s for their value. They buy it because it is currently the best GPU that you can buy, and if you just want the very best, then the price doesn't matter as much. Where it gets interesting is when you compare the 4070 Ti to the 7900 XT. The XT is 5% faster on 1080p, about 11% faster on 1440p, and 15% faster on 4K resolution. But it is also 12 to 13% more expensive, so they kind of seem pretty close in terms of value. That being said, NVIDIA's feature set is still a bit stronger. You get better ray tracing performance, DLSS is still a bit ahead of FSR, their encoder is great for editing, and they're just more power efficient as well. Now, 60 watts while gaming doesn't really seem like much, but depending on your energy prices and how long you game per day, it can add up really quickly. Here's a little graph with a couple of examples. So if you're in the US paying 10 cents per kilowatt hour, you might not care. But many people in Europe are paying closer to 50 cents per kilowatt hour, which equals to about 20 euros more per year if you only game 2 hours per day. But here in the Netherlands, prices are even higher. So we're currently paying about 90 cents per kilowatt hour. So just 2 hours a night would mean 40 euros more per year or 120 euros more over 3 years. And that's just for the energy difference between the two cards. So even if you don't care about ray tracing and some other features, this might shift the balance depending on your energy cost and how much you game per day. If you're choosing between a 4070 Ti and a 7900 XTX, the XTX is about 8% faster on 1080p, 19% faster on 1440p, and 31% faster on 4K resolution, while in theory being 25% more expensive, but in reality it is actually 50% more expensive. So if you find it at MSRP, I would say the XTX might be attractive if you game at 4K and you don't care about things like ray tracing. But at current prices, the 4070 Ti is a better deal for 1440p gaming, or again, for anyone with very high energy prices at the moment. Until a few months ago, it was actually easy to find very good deals on high-end cards from last generation, like 3080s and 3090s, but not anymore. They seem to be completely gone by now, and I couldn't find a single one that costs less than a 4070 Ti. So if you're doubting between a 4070 Ti and a 3080, the 4070 Ti is consistently faster, it is more efficient, and you get some new features like DLSS 3. So unless you find a last gen card for hundreds of dollars or euros less, these are not worth buying anymore. So while it's understandable that a lot of people are frustrated that this 4070 Ti is costing $800 and not $600, it is actually not a terrible option if you're looking to buy a new card, or I would say it is way less bad than some other options out there. The Founders Edition of the 4070 Ti doesn't exist, but I have 5 different models right here. I have the Gaming OC and the Aero from Gigabyte, I have the Tough Gaming from ASUS, the Supreme X from MSI, as well as the Gaming Pro OC from Palette. So let's see how they compare to each other. When it comes to size, some people might not mind getting an oversized card, but you definitely want to make sure it fits because many cases don't really have space for a 34 centimeter long card like the MSI Supreme, for example. The Tough from ASUS is a lot more reasonable, even though 30 centimeters is still pretty big for a GPU, and then the rest kind of fall in between. The MSI also weighs way more than others, so you definitely want to use the GPU holder that comes with the card. Gigabyte and ASUS come with the holder as well, but Palette does not. In terms of clock speeds, there are only small differences between these 5 cards. All cards, except from the Palette, have 2 different BIOS profiles. The faster performance BIOS that is represented in the lighter shade, and the silent or quiet profile that is represented in darker shade in these graphs. And as you can see, they're all very similar. This has been the case for almost every recent NVIDIA launched, and all the cards end up basically performing the same. There are 1 to 3% gaps in performance depending on the title, but that just isn't something you will ever really notice while gaming. So getting the more expensive card will not get you more FPS. Power consumption can sometimes show a big difference between the models, but that just isn't the case here. All cards are within a couple of watts from each other, and keep in mind, this will also vary a bit per sample. But each brand does tune their fan profiles differently. So MSI keeps their cards super quiet in either profile, and Palette and ASUS aim for low noise as well, while both cards from Gigabyte have a very loud primary BIOS profile, but they're pretty quiet in their second quiet BIOS mode. Since all of these cards have a massive cooler on a reasonably low power GPU, thermal results are pretty boring. They're all completely fine. Gigabyte's super loud profiles do show the best results, but in my opinion, there is absolutely no reason to push for such low temps. And even if we look at the quiet modes on all of these cards, the numbers are completely fine. Even the TUF's slightly higher memory temps are far from what I would call problematic, and it just isn't something that you should worry about at all. Now, I know it's a bit of a boring conclusion, but it is what it is. So when it comes to choosing one of these cards, it will come down to either a personal preference or simply the price. Now, if I look at the prices today in the EU, the Gigabyte cards are the most affordable, MSI and ASUS are pretty close, and Palette is unavailable at the moment. With prices like this, I would say the TUF feels a bit too expensive. I personally like to see the smaller card costing less than others and not the most. But between these models, I would personally choose whichever is the cheapest. So either go for the gaming OC in this case, or an even cheaper alternative if you find one at the time of your purchase. And keep in mind, Gigabyte cards come with an extra year of warranty, which is a very nice bonus. In the US, the TUF card is actually the cheapest one, and a small premium over the $800 MSRP feels reasonable given it's a really well-built card that performs well overall. The MSI doesn't feel that unreasonable if you really want either the largest or the quietest card, but the Gigabyte feels a little bit too expensive compared to the others. So the price can really impact which one makes sense to get, and keep in mind prices will vary per region, and they also even vary from day to day. So it is very important to check all the prices in your region at the time of your purchase and then base your decision on that. Given how close all of them are in terms of gaming performance, power consumption, and thermal performance, it doesn't really matter which one you go for. So just pick the cheapest one, or if you want, pick the one that matches your system best. That is all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments down below what are your thoughts on the 4070 Ti now that it has been out for a while. And while you're there, consider clicking the subscribe button to never miss my future uploads. Thanks all, and see you in the next one. Bye!